Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you today about something that affects all of us in one way or another: emotional attachment. We live in a world that constantly pulls on our hearts, our minds, and our spirits. It feels like everywhere we turn, there's someone or something that wants to latch onto us and demand our energy, our emotions, and our time. But here's the truth: not every attachment is a good attachment. Emotional attachment is a powerful force in the human experience, often shaping the way we interact with the world and with others. It's natural to form attachments. We all do it. We attach to people, to places, to ideas, and even to memories. These attachments give us a sense of security, purpose, and connection. At their core, emotional attachments help us build relationships and navigate through life. They provide a sense of stability, comfort, and validation. But while emotional attachment can be a source of strength, it can also become a source of limitation if we're not mindful of how we engage with it. The power of emotional attachment lies in its ability to influence our thoughts, decisions, and behaviors. When we are deeply attached to something or someone, our emotional energy becomes entangled with it. We can feel a sense of joy, fulfillment, or even pride when our attachments are reciprocated. But when those attachments are threatened, challenged, or removed, the emotional impact can be overwhelming. This is why emotional attachment is such a powerful force. It affects us at a deep, often subconscious level, driving our choices, our moods, and our outlook on life. Consider how we attach to people. From childhood onward, we develop emotional bonds with our family, friends, and romantic partners. These relationships shape our sense of identity and belonging. We invest emotionally in others because we want to be loved, understood, and valued. The more emotionally invested we are, the more our well-being can be tied to the people we care about. In healthy relationships, emotional attachment is mutually reinforcing, allowing us to thrive in connection with others. However, when these attachments are one-sided, unbalanced, or toxic, we may find ourselves in a cycle of dependency and emotional turbulence. The emotional energy we invest can drain us when we're constantly trying to maintain or fix a relationship that isn't serving our growth. Emotional attachment can also manifest in our connection to things, our possessions, our achievements, and our sense of control. Think about the emotional value we place on our jobs, our homes, or even material objects. These attachments can create a false sense of security, giving us the illusion that our worth is tied to what we own or accomplish. We start to believe that our possessions define who we are, and the fear of losing them can overwhelm us. It's easy to become attached to the idea of success or recognition because they provide external validation. Yet when those things are threatened or lost, we can find ourselves feeling empty, insecure, or lost. We may even struggle to regain a sense of purpose because we've attached so strongly to something external rather than grounding our sense of worth in who we are at our core. On a deeper level, emotional attachment can be rooted in our fears. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, or fear of being alone can cause us to cling to people, places, or circumstances that give us a sense of safety, even if they aren't healthy for us. Our emotional attachment to these fears can keep us stuck in patterns of behavior that don't serve our well-being. We may resist change because we fear the unknown, or we may stay in toxic relationships because we're afraid of being abandoned. In these situations, emotional attachment can limit our growth, preventing us from stepping into new opportunities or embracing the freedom that comes with releasing old patterns. Understanding the power of emotional attachment is essential because it allows us to recognize when an attachment is serving us and when it is holding us back. Being aware of how and why we form attachments can help us develop a healthier relationship with our emotions, ultimately empowering us to make choices that align with our true values and desires. Identifying the root cause of emotional attachment is a critical step in understanding why certain people, situations, or things have such a strong hold on us. Without this self-awareness, it's easy to continue repeating patterns or holding on to unhealthy attachments without ever addressing the underlying reasons for them. Emotional attachment, when left unchecked, can become an unconscious force that shapes our thoughts, behaviors, and responses to the world. To begin the process of emotional detachment, we must first look inward and uncover what is driving these attachments in the first place. One of the primary reasons people form strong emotional attachments is the need for connection. From birth, we are wired for relationships. We seek love, validation, and acceptance from those around us. These connections are vital to our survival, and they often become the foundation for how we view ourselves and our worth. However, when our need for connection becomes excessive or unhealthy, it can create attachments that are rooted in fear or insecurity. For instance, if we fear abandonment or rejection, we may over-attach ourselves to relationships or situations, holding on tightly to people or things that give us a sense of stability, even if they aren't good for us. In these cases, the attachment is driven by a deep-seated fear of being alone or unworthy, rather than a healthy desire for companionship or emotional fulfillment. Another root cause of emotional attachment is the desire for control. In a world that often feels chaotic or unpredictable, we seek to control our surroundings to feel safe and secure. This need for control can lead to attachments that are based on the fear of losing power or autonomy. People may cling to certain circumstances, possessions, or even relationships because they give them a sense of control. These attachments may not even be conscious. It could simply be the mind's way of creating a sense of order or predictability. However, when we attach ourselves too tightly to control, we risk missing out on the natural flow of life and the opportunity to let go of what no longer serves us. Past trauma or unresolved emotional wounds also play a significant role in the formation of unhealthy emotional attachments. When we experience pain or loss, we can become emotionally attached to the memory of that event or to people who remind us of that experience. These attachments often stem from unhealed emotional wounds that have not been addressed or processed. For example, someone who has experienced betrayal may form attachments based on distrust or the need for constant reassurance, even in situations that do not warrant it. The root cause in this case is the emotional pain from the past, which continues to affect present-day behavior and relationships. These attachments can be difficult to break free from because they are tied to unresolved emotions that have not been fully confronted or healed. Self-worth issues are another significant root cause of emotional attachment. When we struggle with our sense of value or self-esteem, we may look to external sources for validation. We may become attached to people, achievements, or material possessions as a way of feeling better about ourselves. The attachment in this case is driven by the belief that our worth is dependent on outside factors. We may fear that without these attachments, we will lose our sense of identity or significance. This form of attachment is often tied to insecurity, and it can lead us to remain in situations that do not align with our true needs or values simply because they provide a temporary boost to our self-esteem. In some cases, emotional attachment can also be a result of social conditioning or cultural influences. Society often teaches us what we should value, whether it's career success, financial wealth, or the ideal image of a family. When we internalize these ideals, we can become attached to them as markers of success or happiness. We may find ourselves pursuing goals or relationships, not because they align with our true desires, but because they are socially expected or culturally reinforced. These attachments can cloud our judgment and prevent us from realizing that our true happiness lies not in external validation, but in understanding and aligning with our own values and purpose. Understanding the root cause of emotional attachment is not always easy, but it is essential for breaking free from unhealthy patterns. When we take the time to reflect on why we form attachments and what drives our emotional connections, we gain the insight needed to make healthier choices. This process requires honesty, introspection, and a willingness to confront the deeper aspects of our emotional landscape. Setting boundaries is a vital aspect of emotional detachment and emotional well-being. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls that isolate or cut people off, but in reality, they are guidelines for how we interact with the world around us. They help us establish limits on what we are willing to accept, tolerate, or engage with, both internally and externally. Without boundaries, emotional attachments can spiral out of control, leading to exhaustion, resentment, and a loss of self-identity. Setting healthy boundaries is not about shutting people out. It's about protecting and honoring our emotional space while still being able to engage in relationships and experiences. The first step in setting boundaries is recognizing the need for them. Many of us go through life without ever truly defining where our emotional space begins and where it ends. We might find ourselves saying yes to things we don't want to do, constantly overextending ourselves for others, or neglecting our own needs because we feel guilty or afraid to say no. We might let others' expectations and demands dictate our emotional state. Without recognizing this pattern, we may continue to sacrifice our well-being for the sake of pleasing others or maintaining relationships that aren't healthy for us. The recognition that we need boundaries begins with understanding that our emotional health is just as important as the needs and desires of others. Once we recognize the need for boundaries, the next step is to define what those boundaries look like for us. Boundaries are personal and unique to each individual. What works for one person may not work for another, and that's perfectly okay. Some people may need boundaries around their time and energy, setting limits on how much they give to others. Others may need emotional boundaries, protecting themselves from being overwhelmed or drained by the feelings or problems of those around them. Now realize, setting boundaries could also involve physical space, such as needing time alone to recharge or asking for respect in personal interactions. Defining boundaries is about knowing where our emotional comfort zone lies and being proactive in creating a space where we can feel safe, secure, and grounded. So communicating those boundaries is often one of the most challenging parts of the process. Many people fear that setting boundaries will make them seem selfish, rude, or unkind. However, the truth is that healthy boundaries are not about being selfish. They are about being self-aware and self-respecting. When we fail to communicate our needs, we risk violating our own emotional space and allowing others to overstep their limits. Setting boundaries requires clear, direct communication. It's about saying, this is what I need to feel safe, respected, and balanced, and being firm in that request. It may not always be easy, especially if we've spent a lot of time without boundaries, but the more we practice, the easier it becomes to honor and enforce our limits. The next challenge in setting boundaries is learning to enforce them. It's one thing to recognize the need for boundaries and define them, but it's another thing entirely to consistently uphold them. Boundaries require reinforcement, especially when others push against them or when we encounter situations that tempt us to compromise. For example, if we set a boundary around how much time we spend helping others, we may encounter guilt or resistance when someone asks us for more. Enforcing a boundary means standing firm in our decision and not allowing others to manipulate, guilt trip, or pressure us into abandoning our needs. This is where emotional detachment becomes crucial. It's important to understand that enforcing boundaries doesn't make us bad or uncaring. It means that we are choosing to protect our emotional well-being. It's also important to remember that boundaries are not static. As we grow and evolve, our needs and limits may change. What worked for us in one season of life may no longer be applicable in another. This is why setting boundaries is an ongoing process. As our self-awareness deepens, we may find new areas where we need to establish boundaries or adjust existing ones. Flexibility is important, but consistency is key. The more we practice setting and maintaining boundaries, the more we build emotional resilience and strength. Boundaries empower us to take control of our emotional energy and create space for what truly matters: our peace, growth, and well-being. Shifting your perspective is one of the most transformative steps you can take when it comes to emotional detachment. Our perspective, or the way we view ourselves, others, and the world around us, deeply influences how we experience life. We can often become emotionally entangled because of the lenses through which we perceive situations, relationships, or challenges. When our emotional attachments are rooted in a particular perspective, we may hold on to things longer than necessary or invest more of ourselves into situations that no longer serve us. Shifting your perspective means learning to see things in a new light, to reframe how you view your experiences, and to open yourself up to healthier, more balanced ways of thinking. Lastly, the first aspect of shifting your perspective involves recognizing the impermanence of life. One of the primary reasons we struggle with emotional attachment is because we forget that everything is temporary. We often attach ourselves to people, moments, or experiences as if they will last forever, and when they change, we can feel disoriented or even devastated. Whether it's a relationship, a job, or a place we hold dear, nothing is permanent. Understanding that life moves in seasons, that people come and go, and that situations evolve helps us release the need to control or hold on to things that are meant to pass. When we shift our perspective to acknowledge the transient nature of life, we allow ourselves to experience things fully without the weight of holding on to them forever. Another powerful shift in perspective comes from learning to detach your identity from external sources. Many of us tie our sense of self-worth to other people's opinions, achievements, or the roles we play in life. We define ourselves by our relationships, our jobs, or our successes. But the truth is, those things do not define who we are. By shifting our perspective, we learn to separate our sense of identity from external validation so they can no longer influence us or our choices. When we are emotionally attached to the idea that our worth comes from how others see us, we place ourselves at the mercy of their approval. However, when we shift our view and understand that our true value comes from within, we stop seeking validation outside of ourselves. This perspective shift gives us the freedom to make decisions that are aligned with our true desires and values, rather than basing them on how we think others will perceive us. Additionally, shifting your perspective means learning to view challenges and setbacks as opportunities for growth rather than threats. It's natural to feel a strong emotional attachment to our comfort zones, but when we are too attached to what feels safe or familiar, we stunt our growth. A shift in perspective allows us to see difficult situations not as obstacles, but as chances to learn, evolve, and become stronger. Instead of focusing on what we stand to lose, we begin to focus on what we stand to gain. When faced with challenges, instead of clinging to the past or fighting against change, we start to embrace the opportunity for transformation. This shift helps us detach from the need to control every outcome and instead trust the process, knowing that each experience contributes to our growth. Sometimes shifting perspective also means recognizing the power we have to choose our emotional responses. We often feel victimized by our emotions as if they are something that happens to us. But in reality, we have the ability to decide how we respond. Emotions are powerful, but they don't have to control us. By changing our perspective, we realize that while we cannot always control our circumstances, we can control how we interpret and react to them. This shift allows us to detach from the emotional turmoil that comes with feeling powerless or overwhelmed. We can choose to release feelings that no longer serve us and embrace those that empower us. Finally, shifting your perspective requires embracing the idea of letting go. We often cling to the past because it's familiar or because we fear the unknown. But when we learn to shift our perspective and understand that holding on too tightly prevents us from moving forward, we give ourselves permission to release. Whether it's letting go of a grudge, a past relationship, or an old identity, shifting our perspective enables us to create space for new opportunities, healthier connections, and personal growth. Developing self-awareness is a crucial component of emotional detachment, as it empowers us to understand and manage our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. It allows us to gain insight into the core of our emotional attachments and helps us identify patterns that may be hindering our growth or contributing to unhealthy attachments. Self-awareness enables us to observe ourselves objectively, giving us the tools to make better decisions, set healthier boundaries, and take control of our emotional responses. Without self-awareness, we can easily become entangled in our emotions and reactive in situations that demand a more thoughtful, measured response. The first step toward developing self-awareness is cultivating the ability to observe our emotions without judgment. Often, we rush to label our feelings as good or bad, or we suppress them because we're uncomfortable with what we're experiencing. However, true self-awareness involves allowing ourselves to feel without condemnation, acknowledging our emotions for what they are in the present moment. Acknowledging our emotions for what they are in the present moment. When we practice non-judgmental awareness, we begin to notice patterns in our emotional responses, what triggers us, how we react, and why certain situations affect us more deeply than others. This deeper understanding of our emotional landscape provides the clarity needed to make conscious choices rather than allowing our emotions to drive our actions impulsively. Self-awareness also requires us to examine the underlying beliefs and thought patterns that influence our emotional reactions. Often we become emotionally attached to certain outcomes or people because of long-held beliefs about ourselves and the world. For instance, if we believe that our value comes from the approval of others, we may become overly attached to seeking validation in our relationships or careers. These beliefs often operate beneath the surface of our consciousness, shaping our behaviors without our full awareness. By developing self-awareness, we can begin to identify these beliefs and question their validity. We can ask ourselves, why do I feel the need to hold on to this person or situation? What fear or belief is driving my attachment? When we bring these beliefs to light, we have the opportunity to challenge them and replace them with healthier, more empowering perspectives. Another key aspect of self-awareness is understanding our emotional triggers. Every person has certain emotional triggers, events, words, or behaviors that spark an intense emotional response. These triggers often reveal unresolved wounds, insecurities, or fears that we may not be consciously aware of. For example, a small disagreement with a friend might trigger feelings of abandonment, stemming from past experiences of neglect or rejection. By developing self-awareness, we can begin to identify our emotional triggers and explore their origins. Are they rooted in past experiences? Are they connected to deeper emotional needs that we haven't fully addressed? By understanding what triggers us, we can begin to respond to situations in a more intentional and less reactive way, preventing our past wounds from dictating our present behavior. Self-awareness also involves recognizing when we are allowing external circumstances or people to dictate our emotional state. In moments of emotional attachment, it's easy to place our happiness, peace, and security in the hands of others. We may become overly dependent on their approval, actions, or presence to feel good about ourselves. Developing self-awareness means realizing that our emotional state is ultimately in our control. While we can't always control how others behave, we can control how we respond and whether we allow their actions to disturb our inner peace. By recognizing when we are placing too much emotional weight on external sources, we can begin to reclaim our sense of self and detach from situations or people that are not contributing to our well-being. Lastly, developing self-awareness means understanding our emotional boundaries and needs. Many people struggle with emotional detachment because they don't know where their emotional space begins and ends. We might find ourselves taking on the emotions of others, sacrificing our own needs to meet someone else's, or becoming overwhelmed by our desire to please others. Self-awareness helps us recognize when our emotional boundaries are being crossed and when we are neglecting our own needs. It allows us to identify when we are giving too much of ourselves or when we need to take a step back and prioritize our own well-being. By becoming more in tune with our emotions, we can navigate relationships and situations in a way that honors our emotional health while still maintaining connection with others. Self-awareness is not a destination, but a continuous practice. As we grow and evolve, our emotional landscape will shift and our self-awareness must evolve alongside it. However, the more we practice self-awareness, the more we empower ourselves to make conscious choices, break free from unhealthy emotional attachments, and live a life that aligns with our true values and desires. Practicing mindfulness and self-care is fundamental to emotional detachment because they provide the foundation for cultivating emotional resilience and maintaining inner peace. In a world filled with distractions, demands, and constant stimulation, it's easy to lose touch with ourselves and become entangled in our emotions, reactions, and the pressures around us. Mindfulness and self-care help us reconnect with our inner selves, enabling us to navigate life's challenges without becoming overwhelmed or losing our sense of balance. Mindfulness, at its core, is the practice of being fully present in the moment without judgment. It involves paying attention to our thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and surroundings with an open, non-reactive awareness. When we practice mindfulness, we learn to observe our emotions rather than becoming consumed by them. This is particularly valuable when it comes to emotional detachment, as it allows us to notice when we are becoming overly attached to a particular situation, person, or outcome. Mindfulness teaches us to pause and check in with ourselves before reacting emotionally. Instead of immediately responding to a trigger with anxiety, frustration, or fear, we can take a step back, breathe, and observe the situation from a more objective standpoint. By being present in the moment, mindfulness helps us detach from the constant stream of thoughts and judgments that often cloud our ability to make clear decisions. Instead of ruminating over past experiences or worrying about future scenarios, we bring our attention to the here and now, where we have control over our emotional responses. This practice helps us create space between ourselves and our emotions, allowing us to choose how to engage with them. For instance, if we find ourselves becoming attached to an outcome or feeling anxious about an upcoming event, mindfulness gives us the ability to acknowledge those feelings without letting them define our actions. We can accept the emotions as they are without the need to cling to them or let them dictate our behavior. Neutrality is the outcome. It will pass. It's just a feeling, and it doesn't last. In addition to mindfulness, self-care is an essential practice for maintaining emotional detachment. Self-care involves actively taking steps to nurture and protect our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. When we practice self-care, we prioritize our needs, recognize our limits, and give ourselves permission to rest and recharge. This is particularly important when it comes to detaching emotionally from situations or people that drain us. Without self-care, it's easy to become depleted, overwhelmed, or burned out, which can make it more difficult to detach from unhealthy attachments or relationships. Self-care collects you to be mindful, to be present, to be completely with them. Self-care can take many forms, from physical practices like exercise, rest, and proper nutrition, to mental practices such as journaling, reading, or engaging in activities that stimulate our creativity. It also includes emotional self-care, which involves acknowledging our feelings, processing them, and taking steps to protect our emotional health. For example, setting aside time for relaxation or engaging in activities that bring us joy and fulfillment can help us create a sense of balance and emotional stability. When we take care of ourselves in these ways, we build the strength and clarity needed to detach from situations that no longer serve our best interests. Part of self-care also involves setting boundaries and knowing when to say no. Too often we overextend ourselves because we feel obligated or because we feel disappointing others. However, self-care requires us to recognize our limits and honor them. When we say no to things that drain us or violate our boundaries, we create the space necessary to preserve our emotional energy and well-being. This is especially crucial when practicing emotional detachment, as it allows us to disengage from situations that are emotionally taxing or unproductive. Incorporating mindfulness and self-care into our daily lives also means prioritizing our mental health. practicing gratitude, meditation, or breathing exercises can all contribute to reducing stress and enhancing our emotional clarity. It's important to remember that emotional detachment isn't about completely shutting off our emotions or withdrawing from relationships. It's about creating the emotional space to engage with life in a healthier, more balanced way. When we practice mindfulness and self-care, we are better equipped to navigate the complexities of our emotions, maintain a sense of inner peace, and detach from unhealthy attachments that prevent us from living authentically. By regularly practicing mindfulness and self-care, we strengthen our emotional resilience and cultivate a deeper connection to ourselves. This empowers us to make choices that align with our true values, respond to life's challenges with greater calmness and clarity, and protect our emotional well-being in the face of external pressures. Through these practices, we develop the ability to detach emotionally from what no longer serves us while maintaining a healthy, grounded sense of self. Trusting the process is an essential mindset for emotional detachment, as it allows us to let go of the need for control and surrender to the flow of life. Often, we become attached to specific outcomes, expecting things to unfold in a particular way. When reality doesn't align with our expectations, we may experience frustration, disappointment, or a sense of loss. However, trusting the process means relinquishing the need to micromanage every aspect of our lives and instead embracing the belief that everything is unfolding as it should. This mindset enables us to detach from the need for control and accept the journey, no matter how uncertain or unpredictable it may seem. One of the first steps in trusting the process is learning to embrace uncertainty. Life is full of unknowns. And the more we try to control every aspect, the more we limit our ability to grow and experience new possibilities. The discomfort that comes with uncertainty can trigger anxiety or fear, but when we shift our perspective and view uncertainty as an opportunity for growth, we can let go of the need to have everything figured out. Trusting the process means recognizing that we don't need all the answers right now and that life will unfold in its own time. This acceptance of uncertainty frees us from the pressure of needing to control every outcome, allowing us to step back and trust that things will work out as they are meant to. Another critical aspect of trusting the process is patience. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to fall into the trap of instant gratification. We want things to happen quickly, and when they don't, we become frustrated or anxious. Emotional detachment requires us to practice patience and to trust that everything unfolds at its own pace. When we are emotionally attached to specific outcomes or timelines, we often miss the lessons that are meant to be learned along the way. Trusting the process teaches us that growth takes time and that the steps we take now are preparing us for something greater. By practicing patience, we can release the pressure of needing immediate results and focus on the journey rather than the destination. Trusting the process also means having faith that challenges and setbacks are not signs of failure, but opportunities for growth and learning. Life doesn't always go according to plan, and we often encounter obstacles or detours along the way. However, these challenges are often where the most growth occurs. When we are emotionally attached to a specific outcome, we may see setbacks as failures or signs that we are on the wrong path. But when we trust the process, we understand that each challenge is an integral part of our journey. We learn to embrace adversity as a tool for development and resilience. Instead of feeling discouraged, we shift our focus to what we can learn from each experience, knowing that each step brings us closer to where we need to be. In addition to embracing setbacks, trusting the process requires letting go of perfectionism. Many people struggle with emotional attachment because they believe things must unfold in a flawless or ideal way. When things don't meet our expectations, we can feel disheartened or anxious, clinging to the idea of a perfect outcome. Trusting the process means accepting that life is messy, unpredictable, and imperfect. It's about letting go of the need for everything to look a certain way and embracing the imperfections that come with growth. When we trust that our path doesn't have to be perfect, we free ourselves from the pressure of unattainable standards, allowing ourselves to experience the beauty of the process itself. Trusting the process also involves cultivating self-compassion. When we face difficult situations or challenges, it's easy to become harsh with ourselves, thinking that we should be further along or doing better. However, self-compassion allows us to treat ourselves with kindness and patience as we navigate the process. So, trusting the process means acknowledging that we are doing the best we can with the resources and knowledge we have, and that mistakes and setbacks are part of the learning journey. Instead of criticizing ourselves for not being where we think we should be, we learn to honor the progress we've made and the growth we've experienced. And we can do that by just looking at our history and saying, lastly, trusting the process requires releasing attachment to specific people, places, or outcomes. When we attach too strongly to an outcome or expect certain people to play specific roles in our journey, we risk limiting ourselves and our growth. Trusting the process means understanding that everything, relationships, opportunities, and experiences has its place and time. When we release the need to control or hold on to certain attachments, we create the space for new opportunities and possibilities to enter our lives. This detachment doesn't mean we don't care or that we stop working toward our goals. It means we trust that in the end, what is meant for us will come at the right time in the right way. By trusting the process, we free ourselves from the stress and anxiety of trying to control every outcome. We shift our focus from the need to manage every detail to the belief that life is unfolding as it should and that our growth and development are part of a larger plan. This mindset fosters resilience, patience, and peace as we navigate the challenges and joys of life. In conclusion, emotional detachment is not about shutting down our emotions or disconnecting from the world around us. It's about creating the space for healthy, balanced emotional responses. By recognizing the power of emotional attachment, identifying the root causes of our attachments, and setting boundaries, we can begin the journey toward emotional freedom. Shifting our perspective, developing self-awareness, practicing mindfulness and self-care, and trusting the process all work in harmony to help us detach from unhealthy emotional ties and reclaim our peace. This process takes time, patience, and commitment, but with each step, we grow stronger and more capable of navigating life's complexities without losing ourselves. The second principle is this: you are not your dreams. You're the greatest monument that's ever been created. When we learn to emotionally detach, we unlock the power to live more authentically, make decisions that align with our true desires, and build relationships and experiences that nurture our well-being rather than drain it.